Hey everyone, it's Ryder from Skip. It's Tuesday, August 3rd. Important video today on exactly how SBA loan officers approve EIDL loans. In particular, EIDL loan increases. We have inside information on how exactly the process happens and most importantly, how the SBA went from 2,000 applications being reviewed per day to nearly 40,000 applications reviewed per day. That's the latest numbers they've given. So for the millions of you still waiting or in reconsideration and thinking about getting an SBA loan in the future, I hope this video helps. The bottom line is the SBA has made significant process improvements and technology improvements to speed things up. And in this video, I'll share explicitly what that has been. I will also address targeted EIDL grant news. Many of you have questions about the future of that program, given that the infrastructure bill will take away funding from targeted EIDL grants. Be sure to watch until the end of this important video and like this video so others see it. If you're new to our channel or you've been watching for months, hit subscribe today. You know, our entire team works tirelessly to research and provide information for you. Every subscriber really helps us. Okay, first, briefly on targeted EIDL grants. I talked about this yesterday. I'll link to that video above, and I'll link to the post in the description. In the new infrastructure bill, it explicitly says this $17.5 billion from the targeted EIDL advances is permanently rescinded. The bill has not been passed, but this essentially takes the majority of the leftover funding and puts it elsewhere to help fund roads, bridges, all the other things that are in the infrastructure bill. It hasn't been approved yet. It's probably going to be at least a few weeks until Biden signs this into law. But what seems likely here is that people in the queue who qualify, again, based on 30% reduction in revenue over an 8-week period, less than 300 employees, and living in a low-income community based on the census information. If you're still in the queue or under reconsideration, you probably still have a good shot at topping up to 10K and or the additional 5K supplemental. If you're in another group that is not eligible now, it seems very unlikely that they will change the rules right now. So I know many of you are frustrated about that. We have more links to resources and funding opportunities in the description if you want to take a look. We're helping hundreds of thousands of people with alternatives to targeted EIDL advances. But this is the disappointing news from yesterday when Congress released the draft text of the act. You know, we saw this coming because only $2.6 billion of targeted advances had been allocated so far to 313,000 businesses. So we expected that this money was going to be taken away. And for all of you, the good news is there are still the EIDL loans, 24 months of working capital. First, I'll talk about how they calculate the 24 months of working capital. Then I'll go over what we heard from our source, an SBA loan officer. You know, we've had many people comment on our videos that work at the SBA. We really appreciate you weighing in and valuing the information we put out. You know, of course, myself and our team, we try to do as much research as possible and put out what information we think will help small businesses the most, period. That's our mission, to make these programs easier to understand, easier to apply, so they're not intimidating government programs or funding programs, but you can actually understand what's required each step of the way. Here is how they calculate the loan amount. According to a recent webinar they did, the economic injury formula is your annual revenue minus annual cost of goods sold times 2, and that equals the loan amount. You need to have less than 500 employees, credit scores of at least 570, and evidence of being in or invested in launching a business by January 2020. Again, this is a slide directly from their webinar last week. Now, this is one of the headlines we put up last week. SBA increases EIDL loan processing 20x. It was incredible to see this data last week. How the heck did they do this? From 2,000 per day to nearly 40,000 per day in the span of a few weeks. Well, we have information now on the processing. You know, nothing here is proprietary, but it's helpful for you as the borrower or applicant to understand how this is possible. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. Many of you have remarked that you've gotten your EIDL loan increase or you're still waiting, and the SBA says most applicants will have a decision within the next 2 weeks. They've said that. So here's what they've done. Prior to July 1st, each loan officer had a process with around 20 steps in it. So I'm going to read some of the steps here and tell you what was changed and how they were able to speed things up. First, prior to July 1st, here were some of the steps. Applicant assigned to a loan officer, then an introductory call made by a loan officer to the applicant/borrower. Loan officer would review notes in the application looking for additional loans approved in any other SBA programs. The loan officer would verify the business was in existence prior to the pandemic pandemic, confirm the company legal name is correct, confirm the owner had the largest ownership percentage and is the primary owner, request any additional documentation. Loan officer must call and email the applicant to request this documentation. So that was a lot of the problem. The phone calls took a lot of time because in many cases, applicants wanted to vent to the loan officer. So that's what stretched the calls for a long time and what slowed down the processing. I'll mention more on that in a minute. Then they'd search SSN and EIN to make sure that they haven't received other SBA funds and the total amount wouldn't be over $2 million. Review the tax transcript. If the business started after December 31st, 2019, they would use projections to determine eligibility, compare the revenue and the cost of goods sold. Stated on the original application, if there was a discrepancy, loan officer must contact the applicant for an explanation. After the previously listed criteria is met, a loan officer should recommend approval of the increase request or not. If the applicant borrower did not file a 2019 tax return, grossly overstated their margins, or lack eligibility, the loan officer should decline the loan. Then the applicant could request reconsideration by providing documentation to overcome the decline reason. Other reasons for decline are not qualified as a U.S. citizen, delinquent child support, business ownership date after January 30th, 2020, no IRS record of taxes filed. If credit score is under 570, a cash flow analysis to determine repayment would be needed if possible. If there's an open or personal bankruptcy claim, that's also a decline. And this is the process after July 1st of this year. First, the application packet was assigned to a loan officer, and also look for any other loans approved within the SBA programs. Then confirm the company legal name is correct. Then the loan officer would email the applicant to request documentation and provide 3 days to respond. If they didn't receive a response within 3 days, they would withdraw the application as not interested. The next step was to search SSN and EIN if applicable for all applicants on loan to determine if additional loans have been funded. Then they'd review the tax transcript from the IRS. Applicant submitted tax transcripts cannot be used according to this source. If businesses started after 12/31/2019, transcript will not be available, and projections should be used to determine eligibility. Then they'd input revenues and cost of goods sold on the 2019 transcript to the application. After all those previous criteria are met, the loan officer should recommend approval of the increased request or not. Basically, they eliminated some of that back and forth and the requirement to have a phone call. According to our source, it would take them around 30 to 45 minutes to process a file once they had everything they needed to make a decision. So there was some increased automation, but most of the key changes involved streamlining the review process used by the loan officers. This person can now get 5 done in an hour. And the most important factor there was the elimination of phone calls. I mentioned that a lot of applicants may want to vent on the phone call asking, why is this needed? Why is that needed? They'd want an explanation for this and that would make for a long due diligence phone call. The second piece of information that is very important is SBA loan officers want to do everything possible to approve you. That's their goal. They are not looking to decline people. That is a myth I want to debunk right now. Of course, there is rampant fraud out there, so they are trying to detect any fraud and eliminate it. And that, of course, is what slows down a lot of the processing. The bottom line is they've eliminated a lot of the steps. So if you are still waiting, hopefully in these next few weeks, because of these new changes, you will have a decision one way or another. As always, if you're tired of waiting or you want alternatives to funding, we have partner fintech companies that also do low interest loans. Obviously not as good as these SBA EIDL loans, but still competitive. I'll leave those links in the description. They're also always on our app. You know, we have a marketplace of government related services and information on our app. It's HelloSkip in the App Store and Google Play. You can join hundreds of thousands of others. Tomorrow we have a new funding tracker coming out. So by the time you're watching this video, it may be live. Go check it out on the app, and I'll share more news on that later this week. Most importantly, stay well, stay healthy, and I'll see you tomorrow.